time that the music here is exquisite. Thank you. Get all my books out. Learning is one of my highest values, so I'm always surrounded in books. And thank you for the introduction of my book, If I Were Your Daddy. There will be copies for sale if you should want that same deal, one book 25, 3 for 20. The reason why that is because it's a book to be shared with families. But today I'm not talking about this book. I'm talking about the story behind the book, the very personal story behind the book. Now this book, I went on a book tour, spoke several hundred radio stations, was on television many times. But the story I'm telling you today is the one that made that book possible. The one that made my contribution to the world to really look at what great fathering looks like, so that every human being can have it, whether you're an adult or a child. The story behind this was, it was like I was preparing the soil. Now, the reason why I give it is not just to talk about me. I don't really like doing that very often, except if it blesses and inspires and supports you. So my hope today is that you'll find something that will inspire you around the ideal of forgiveness and wholeness, and allow you to create a really profound 2016. I have a friend who's a professional sailor, and he told me, I thought it was a really interesting analogy. He says, Julia, 1 or 2 degrees on an change in course, on the onset of a destination, makes a huge, huge factor in where you end up. Just 1 or 2, it makes sense, right? 1 or 2 changes, starts a little here, but by the end, it's a big difference in where you end up. So I maintain that today, I'll give you 2 degrees of change that can have a profound effect in your life and how you reach out to others. So question first, how many have ever felt that you've been wronged, that you've ever had to forgive something, or that someone had to forgive something that you did? Anybody? Am I the only one? No. It's kind of a universal condition in life we will all face. And that's how my story begins. It was 2000, as they told you about earlier, it was about year 2000. And the man that I loved, I found out that I was expecting. And to my surprise, that he didn't want to have anything to do with the child or me. So there I am, New York City. I have no health insurance. I'm an art student. I felt very much alone, afraid. I couldn't tell my parents because of the shame I felt, unwed mother. I tried to join a church. No, it wasn't this church, because you guys would have taken me in. But I tried to join a church, and they told me, put me aside, but they said, we think that you shouldn't join. There'll be too much discussion around the fact that I was pregnant, and I didn't have a wedding ring on. I do now, but I didn't then. So there I was, alone, afraid, couldn't tell my parents, had no one, no health insurance. I was afraid. I felt so abandoned. So here's my dilemma that I had, is that was the world I was living in. However you feel, that is the world you create. And the world I created was very much feeling sorry for myself, very much feeling afraid. But the world I wanted my son to be born into, in 9 months' time, looked very different. I wanted a world full of love, sufficiency, wholeness. And as the mother, I provided that world to him. My consciousness would provide the world by which he would breathe. So I wanted a world of ease and openness, the kind of world where things can be birthed, new ideas can be birthed, you're open. So I had this dilemma. I had 9 months to change from where I was to where I wanted the world to be. The world I wanted him to be born into. Joseph Campbell, some of you may know that, is a very famous historian writer. He talks about a hero's journey. That was my hero's journey, and I had 9 months to do it. So, remember I said this wasn't just all about me. I submit that everybody is pregnant with potential. Every single one of you. Men too. You're all pregnant with potential. And if you could just go inside for a moment and think about if you could give birth to something in 9 months, some potential. If you have something you really want, what would it be? Just what comes to mind? I asked my new husband this, and he said, well, I started my new job, so I'd really love to give birth to something meaningful to my company. So we all have something. Maybe it's a repair of a relationship. Maybe it's a better relationship with some of our family members. Maybe it's more financial abundance. The 2 degrees of change I'm going to talk about today can be applied not just for forgiveness, but increasing your life. And what's in 9 months from now? Thanksgiving. So what will you be giving Thanksgiving for? Now, my hero's journey looks like 4 to 6 hours a day, literally, of prayer, meditation, and study. 4 to 6 hours every single day. And so the insights that I share with you today were hard sought. There was a lot of, the story in the Bible where Jacob wrestled with the angel. I wrestled with a lot of angels to get a feeling of peace. But I maintain that these 2 degrees of change, it won't take you 4 to 6 hours a day if you implement them. So the first degree of change is this. I discovered that what I was looking for was not out there, that it was an inside game. Now, I got this because we tend to think in society that, well, if the economy, the world wants to say it's person, place, or thing that influences you. Well, if that person just would, just get along a little better, it'd be a little bit more pleasant, or if, the economy was better, it's always person, place, or thing. It comes to us so many times to say, guess what? Your goodness, your happiness is outside of you, and it belongs over there. And if you do that, you can never do anything about it. So the first thing I realized is that my dilemma had nothing to do with my son's father. It had to do with my own thinking. So that's where I started. So that's the first season. Now, one of the things you have to do is you have to identify the decoys. So the decoys are the things in your head that you say, well, I can't do this because, or if this would change because. What are the person, places, or things that seems to limit you? I can only make so much money. I can only do this. What are those? Identify those decoys. And then I studied a book called Science and Health by Mary Baker Eddy. She was a very prominent metaphysician, female, turn of the century. She wrote a book called Science and Health, and I did study this book intensely during this period. I found this citation. Divine science, rising above physical theories, excludes matters, resolves things into thoughts, and replaces the objects of material sense with spiritual idea. So it's that last. So basically, metaphysics resolves things into thoughts and replaces the objects of material sense with spiritual idea. So what were the things here? I was struggling with security, having enough income, abandonment, feeling alone, supported. All those things someone could say they're outside of you. But if I resolved the things into thoughts, it created a really different, it created a lot of prayer time. For example, if our financial abundance and our security is not outside ourselves, if it's a condition of God's ever-present love and supply, and it is always with you. It couldn't be taken away. I included it. I didn't have to wait for somebody to give it to me. I included it. I did that with every single thing that I thought lived out there. I looked and found that it lived and abided in me because it was given to me from God. It was a divine quality. Every single thing that I thought I didn't have, I studied enough till I realized that I included it. They were divine qualities. Now, that sounds great, right? But then there's this, so here I am, I'm buoyed, I'm feeling better about things, I'm getting a handle on it. And then it's like I tie something around my neck and I sink to the bottom of the ocean again. And the thing that sunk me to the ocean is what I call JCC, judgment, criticism, and condemnation. Now, I discovered this because I realized that when my thoughts led to, I call it getting on your high horse, like, I'm so good and they did this to me, and you get on your high horse and you point your finger because this person did this and this did that. It's judgment, criticism, condemnation. I was abandoned, how could he do that to me, blah, blah, blah. When I was on my high horse one afternoon in my prayerful meditation time, I heard a voice audibly. And it said, Julia, I love him just as much as I love you. A voice, tender, loving teacher voice, telling me that my son's father was just as loved as I was. To correct, God must not withhold love. He loves equally. And that just got me down off that high horse. Suddenly I'd learned something about love. Years following, many years after my son was born, when I was teaching him about how to recognize judgment, criticism, and condemnation, we started playing a game called the shame, blame, or justify game. We got this from a mentor called Jack Canfield, who wrote the foreword to my book. Now, I just digress a little bit because this is a really powerful way to catch it when you're in shame, blame, or justifying. What you do is you do a family member. Children are the best because they will do anything to earn money. I said to my son, we had 2 jars. One's Julia, one's Jackson. And I said, if you catch me shaming myself, shame is yourself. You turn that criticism on yourself. Now, who's ever done that? No one, right? You turn that criticism. So if you shame, you blame someone else. You blame the economy, you blame your boss, you blame your husband, you blame this. Or you justify your behavior, then you have to put a quarter or $1 in the other person's jar. My son was an expert at catching me when I shame, blame, or justify. Oh, Mom, no. So what you did is, instead of justification, you just said, I forgot to do this. I'm sorry. I didn't say it was because I was late in traffic. It's a powerful way to catch it. And you just try it. Your children or a friend. And in the result, then he doesn't shame, he doesn't blame, he doesn't turn things on. It was a very powerful thing I learned. So, number 1, course correction is, can someone get me a tissue? I hate to be. Oh, thank you. I hate to be sniffling up here. Is that it's not out there. The second thing is that something happens. Thanks, Jimmy. Something happens when you start to realize that your security doesn't come from a job, that your supply doesn't come from a source other than God, that your happiness is not dependent on others, that it's a divine quality that God gives you because you are connected. Something happens when you start to really feel that those qualities that you thought were out there live in you. And what happens is that your identity changes. I was working with a man who was like a spiritual healer to help me, support me in my process of my journey. And I called him and I said, Jack, I think I finally get it. He's like, what, Julia? I said, there's nothing to forgive. And he goes, you got it. Think about it. Talk about radical, profound forgiveness. Your identity is so whole that what you thought you were lacking or didn't have, you realize God filled. You realize you had it. You have it. There's nothing to forgive. I was never abandoned. I was never without. When I felt that, I realized there is nothing to forgive. And I maintain that that is the most powerful way to forgive, is to see your own divinity and wholeness so clearly that there's nothing to forgive. Now, in the Himalayan yogi tradition, they call the identification with God, they call it your essential self. And they say that your essential self is who you are, all filling, all. And Peggy, can you put up another tradition called the Saint Germain Foundation of the I Am activity, which I found, this is like us walking around, and this is your God presence. This is the way they depict it. And I found this, and it answered so many questions. This is your essential self. This is the God within you. This was how I didn't have to feel like my supply came from something else, because every one of us is connected to the divine. We're all connected. It's God within you. You don't have to look over there for God. You are connected to love. You don't have to find it. You're connected to love. Now, the I am presence it's that focus of God that creates your body, but it's also the source of your life, the source of your love, the source of everything you need. To me, as I grew up studying the Bible in churches, it had new meaning to I am that I am. I am that I am. It is not apart from me. Or Jesus said, I and my Father are one. To me, this explained it. I and my Father are one. Now imagine walking around, and anything you need to do, you think about doing it from your I am presence. You think about God within you, helping you to do every single thing. It's like tapping into like the mother lode of infinite possibilities. Why? Because you are connected. Yeah. So I would but some things creep in. Let me read to you. This is a book from this activity, and it's called the I Am Discourses, and Wayne Dyer studied this book and wrote a book from it. It says, the mistake that students make, and which delays their achievement, is in feeling that they're acting a falsehood and declaring the perfection that they do not see manifest in their appearance or activity. So how many people can identify that? So you think, well, okay, I'm claiming that I'm connected with God, but I ain't saying that. It's not happening. You know, this guy still hasn't showed up. I still don't have any money. So although you're having this wonderful spiritual illumination, you don't seem to see it happening. The medical report still looks pretty grim. And this is a master called Saint Germain who wrote this. He says, I tell you sincerely from my own experience that we must acknowledge the one presence, intelligence, and power, then claim it as our own in every thought and activity. We must acknowledge the one presence, intelligence, and power, then claim it as our own in every thought and activity. It is the only way mighty perfection can be brought into the outer appearances and the fullness of your use. In claiming this mighty presence and activity, you consciously set it into action in your life, home, world, and affair. I guess that's the meaning of faith, right? That even though you can't see it, you can feel it. And the way I always know is that you always get that sense of peace, you know? It's like what you said, when you're doing the right things, you can feel it. When you feel that peace, you know that you're in tune. And in my experience, it does show up in the human experience. So, how does my story end? Everything that looked like I didn't have was miraculously brought about. Now, the father didn't come back into my life, but I had such incredible friends that showed up that the other moms that were married, that I was in like birthing classes with, said, gosh, I wish I had support like that, because they were amazing. I didn't think I had health care coverage, but it turns out that my health care that was canceled 4 years ago, for some reason, they covered me, all $14,000 of medical expenses. I had a painless childbirth, 45 minutes. My only focus was God is love, because there wasn't resentment lurking in my thought. I had worked that out. I was in the presence of God, and God is love, and that was the only thing that was present in my thought. And another thing this tradition teaches is that rather than battling each other, is that when you want to have a conversation with someone, say there's conflict in the family, that the best way to talk to them is for you to go up to your God presence, then go over to theirs, have a conversation, and ask for it to come down to them. And that's what I did when I talked to my unborn child. I said things like, it doesn't make any sense that one spiritual idea could hurt another spiritual idea. So we're going to come in this together. And I had this conversation with this yet unborn child. And my midwife said it was the most amazing birth she had ever seen. And I submit it's because of 2 degrees of change. A, the first one, to review. What we think is out there is always in here. Any change you want out there happens in your own consciousness. Look for signs of judgment, criticism, and condemnation, because it will sink your ship. And when you see them, just say, oh, I see it, sorry. God within me, please take it out of my thoughts. I don't want to dwell there. Just let them go. And the second thing is for you to realize that you are connected to the divine. Joseph Campbell writes, now I want you to think about your own hero's journey. Wherever the hero may wander, wherever he may do, he is ever in the presence of his own essence, for he has the perfected eye to see. You have the perfected eye to see. There is no separateness. And then to end, think about your own journey and declare this for yourselves. I am the light of God that never fails. I know I am the use of God's limitless opulence. I am the active presence bringing this money into my hands and use instantly. I am God in action in everything I do. I am the only healing presence. I am my perfect sight and hearing. I am God in action. Thank you. I do have a reading list, if you want, from things that really helped me in my journey.